12 o'clock on your Friday afternoon. Welcome in. It is now the halftime show. Tyler Headstill along with you here, live from Darlington Raceway, part of the Schroeder's Towing Roadshow. Of course, you know Schroeder's Towing is the best and fastest hookers in town, take care of all of your towing needs. We appreciate them for allowing not only myself, but Jen Jensen, Elijah Campbell, and Preston Thorne to be out here at Darlington Raceway for the day as we not only preview the week one of college football slate, but also the Cookouts on the 500 as NASCAR's playoffs get rolling coming up this weekend. I was telling Jack a little bit earlier, I got kind of panicked when I was driving in because where I live in Lexington, it's right at about an hour and 20 minutes from the racetrack. And I knew because when you have media credentials, you get the emails during the week of, hey, here's what's happening when. You get kind of a rundown of the daily schedule. And I looked on the schedule and I saw that the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, who race tomorrow, and we'll have some tickets to give away for the Sober Slammer 200 coming up a little bit later on. Their haulers were coming in between 8 and 10. Now, I've been here, and there's only one way in and one way out. So when haulers are coming in, no other traffic can get in. So I'm sitting out there on the Harry Bird Highway behind the racetrack in traffic, watching these haulers come in at like 8:15 or 8:10 or something like that, panicking on how long this is going to take, hoping I can get in here to be able to do my show and everything like that. Fortunately, that ended up working out okay. Got in here a couple minutes after that, and I'm back in my closet at the back of the media center. It's a closet. It's pretty spacious back here. There's actual radio rooms on the other side of the Jim Hunter Media Center that are extremely small, which I'm very fortunate. Our guy Matt here with NASCAR Communications has allowed me a bigger room to be able to hang out in because, again, I'm here for 6 hours, 3 hours down, 3 more hours to go. A lot of things to get to over the course of this show today. Obviously, plenty to talk about with South Carolina and Virginia Tech. Going to be talking with Brian Edwards, a Vegas insider, coming up at 1:30 today, or excuse me, 12:30 today. We'll get his best bets for the weekend and some numbers to look at ahead of week one of college football, as well as Chris Deering talking some high school football with me at 1:15. I'll be talking to Alex Hayden of the Motor Racing Network coming up at 1:30. As I really dive into the Cookout Southern 500 and the NASCAR playoffs. And then our guy Heath Klein, of course, you knew him on these airwaves for many years from 3 until 6 p.m. doing his show. He'll join me in the 2 o'clock hour, talk some college football, as well as we get set for a fun weekend of college football. And the funnest part here locally is, of course, going to be South Carolina taking on Virginia Tech coming up on Sunday. What a long off season, right? I know college football, and I think it was Matt Berry on the call last night for South Florida and Boise. By the way, shout out to the Bulls for that big win there. Alex Gullish seems to have gotten that program turned in the right direction, and a huge win for them. First top 25 win since they beat Navy, I believe, back in 2016. I saw in the game last night. But Matt Berry said when that game kicked off, the longest offseason of all sports has finally come to an end. And my goodness, has it felt like a long off season, not only from the standpoint of just waiting for games to get here, but college football is now that sport, college sports in general, but specifically college football. The news cycle in the off season is so full of the things that we don't love to talk about, right? When you talk about NIL, when you talk about lawsuits, when you talk about realignment, when you talk about all these other things. I saw a thing for Brett McMurphy the other day where he was quoting something from the Maryland athletic director talking about, hey, the Big Ten could go to 20 teams in 2030. And in the middle of July, yes, that's something we would have spent time on. But I saw that. I'm like, no, I'm done with realignment talk, at least until the offseason, or in case something crazy happens, we get some kind of announcement in the middle of the year. As far as speculation goes, I don't want to talk about realignment for the next several months because we finally have games to talk about. And I'm so excited to see what Carolina has in store coming up on Sunday with this game against Virginia Tech. And of course, there's a lot more extra juice going into a week one when you have a quality opponent, right? And that's no disrespect to playing, the Old Dominions in a game that was a lot tighter than we thought it was going to be a year ago. Eastern Illinois, of years past, or insert FCS team here. But going into those games that what should happen is your team win that game pretty handily. You get a lot of backups in, and it's kind of a good, slow way to start the season, right? That way you can knock off the cobwebs and all that kind of stuff. And, like Georgia's playing Marshall tomorrow. I think is it Ole Miss playing Georgia State or something along those lines. They're all playing tune-up games to get themselves rolling a little bit before they start taking on the tougher competition a little bit later on in the season. But Carolina's not doing that, and I commend Carolina. Ray Tanner was the AD when this game was made years ago, but Jeremiah Donati, Shane Beamer, all of them for wanting to have these kind of games and to be able to start the season like this. Again, as I've said many times, I would much rather for this game be in Blacksburg or Columbia compared to in Atlanta, a neutral site, but still, it's a cool game nonetheless, being a part of the Aflac kickoff and standing alone on Sunday too, which is pretty neat. And for a program like South Carolina that is always looking for exposure, always looking for people to watch, to get their eyes on the product that is South Carolina, you obviously have a great opportunity by playing this game as a standalone coming up on Sunday. And we're going to learn a lot about Carolina in this game because you're going up against a quality opponent. Yeah, Virginia Tech's not exactly expected to win the ACC or something along those lines, but they could be a good team. And I say could be because we just don't know a lot about them because they've got so much that's changed and so much turnover in the offseason. We're going to be learning about them right as this game's going along. So Beamer and company are going to be learning about them just like you and I are as we're watching this game happening on Sunday. But I feel like South Carolina's got a really good opportunity to win this game. And when you have the quarterback situation figured out, then you have more of an assurance, right? All of last offseason, we talked about and it wasn't really a battle. We knew Lenore Sellers was going to win the job, but we didn't fully understand what we had in Lenore Sellers going into the Old Dominion game outside of the handful of plays he had against, Furman and Vanderbilt in his freshman season, back in 2023. So there was a lot of unknowns going into last year, not only for quarterback, but for a lot of positions, but mainly at quarterback. Being the biggest concern because that's the most important position on the field. And if you don't have that figured out, then you're always going to be worried about it. That's not the case this year. You have the guy. You have what might legitimately be the best quarterback this program has ever seen when it's all said and done. Certainly his upside potential tells you that when you look at the prognostications of Heisman Trophy and first round pick in the draft and all that kind of stuff. So you've got that figured out and it makes you feel pretty good. Now, the question becomes with Sellers is, okay, how big of a step does he make in year number 2, right? We saw him work out those kinks of being a first-time starter through those first, handful of games last year. And again, the Old Dominion game last year was rough. Completed under 50% of his passes, just didn't look like he was ready for the moment. And as we learned, in the piece that came out on The Athletic a couple months ago, the one that detailed the supposed $8 million offer that he got, or a multi-million-dollar offer that he got from Auburn to transfer in the offseason, Dow Loggins talked about, man, Sellers came to him after that Old Dominion game, said, man, people are killing me online. People are tweeting at me, talking about me, all that kind of stuff. That's hard to deal with. And he eventually did, whether just by ignoring that noise or whatever, did get more comfortable in this offense a year ago. And we saw what he turned into in the back half of last season and is the reason why he's being touted and propped up so much this offseason because of what he was able to do in the final form of himself in year number 1 as a starter that we saw at the end of the year. Now you go into an offseason where he loses Dow Loggins as offensive coordinator, but you have kind of the next best thing. If you can't have the same guy from a year ago, then you at least have the guy that was working with you directly on the sidelines, after each and every single drive a year ago in Mike Shula, that at least continues that continuity. Now, from a exact play call standpoint, Shula's going to be different. Could the scheme look a little different? Maybe. There could be some twist and wrinkles in there that Dow Loggins didn't quite have. Because, again, Shula has his own long background of play calling and being a head coach in football before. So he's probably got some ideas that he's bringing to the table that Dow Loggins maybe didn't incorporate into his own game plan. But for the most part, it's all relatively the same. And Shula's goal, and he said this from, when he took over this role after Dow Loggins left for the bowl game last year, was to make Sellers a better all-around quarterback. And did we see a little bit of that in the bowl game in terms of trying that, in terms of not relying on his feet as much? We did. And that was met with mixed results, mixed reviews from people in the fan base, but it was a start, right? And now they've had 8+ months of working together, drilling, obviously working with the other guys on offense to take him to that next level, which we obviously hope he can do. And we'll see if he's able to do that coming up on Sunday. And again, what happens on Sunday is not the end all be all. This is a week 1 game. And as I mentioned, you look at week 0 games, you look at the week 1 games being played last night, you saw a lot of sloppiness, missed assignments, dropped footballs, missed tackles, busted coverages. All those kind of things are prevalent across football in week number 1. Again, you don't have a series of tune-up games like preseason in the NFL to kind of knock out some of those bugs before the season gets started proper. So Carolina is going to make some mistakes on Sunday. Carolina is probably going to do something that makes you put your head in your hands at some point over the weekend. It's about not letting those situations kill you, right? It's about being able to minimize the damage when those kind of things happen. And last year, you did have a defense that was able to bail you out at times when you made some critical turnovers. You did make some big mistakes. We don't know if that's going to be the case this year. You have a lot of faith in Coach Beamer, in Clayton White, in all the assistants on that defense, that they're going to be able to keep the status quo from a year ago and hopefully have a defense that's once again talked about as one of the best in the nation and can potentially put multiple guys in the NFL once again, but we don't know for sure. And we're not going to know until, again, we see toe meat leather coming up on Sunday and this game gets rolling, properly there. But if you have a defense that can help you minimize the damage from your mistakes, you're going to be in pretty good shape. That goes back to what I said at the end of the last hour in terms of, giving my thoughts on how I thought this game would end, where I'm baking in that there's going to be mistakes that Virginia Tech's going to capitalize on. I think Virginia Tech, being the fact that they have so much new, like Carolina has players from the portal, Carolina has freshmen that are going to come in and play, but not nearly to the degree that Virginia Tech is going to be dealing with coming up on Sunday. So I almost kind of bake in the fact that I think Virginia Tech's going to make more of those mistakes. I think Virginia Tech's going to have more of those issues because they're just a team that doesn't have as much chemistry in game actual situations going into this game compared to what South Carolina has. So I do hope that's going to pay a lot of dividends for Carolina in this game. And I do think they do end up winning this one on Sunday. I'll get back to my score predictions and all that stuff a little bit later on in the show. But we'll dive into some of the sound from yesterday as we got to hear for not only from yesterday, but from earlier on this week when we talked to Colby Crawford of VT Scoop 24/7 as he shared his thoughts and his expectations for this Virginia Tech team. And again, we're also going to be talking to Brian Edwards, a Vegas insider, coming up at 12:30 as we'll get some of his best bets and thoughts of the weekend as well. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head is part of the Schroeder's Towing Roadshow. Of course, Schroeder's Towing, the best and fastest hookers in town around Columbia. Thank you for allowing us to be out here, myself included, at Darlington Raceway as we talk not only about the college football weekend, but the Cookout Southern 500 that starts off NASCAR's playoffs. It's halftime show. Dive back more into Virginia Tech coming up next here on your Friday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head flying solo with you here on your Football Friday. But just as exciting as the week one of college football is obviously the Cookout Southern 500 to start the NASCAR playoffs coming up Sunday night here at the Darlington Raceway as the final 10 races of the regular season are here. Kyle Larson, William Byron, a tie at the top of the point standings as we head into the first three races and then eliminate four drivers, three more races, eliminate four after that, three more races, eliminate four after that, and then you have a final four racing for a championship coming up in Phoenix in November. By the way, we'll be talking with Alex Hayden of the Motor Racing Network coming up at 1:30, getting some thoughts on the playoffs in Darlington Raceway as well. So looking forward to that. But before we dive back into football, since we are here at Darlington, thanks again to Schroeder's Towing for the Schroeder's Towing Roadshow allowing me to be out here. I do have one more pair of tickets to give away to tomorrow afternoon's Sober or Slammer 200 for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series as part of their playoffs as well. You got to answer a trivia question, though, and this is on our Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100. First person to text in the correct answers will win that pair of tickets to go see the NASCAR Craftsman Trucks tomorrow at Darlington Raceway. The question is, when NASCAR returned from the COVID break back in 2020, their first race back was here at Darlington, the Real Heroes 400. Who won that race? First answer on the Firehouse Subtext text line at 803-404-6100 will win that pair of tickets. Getting back into football now, we look at this Virginia Tech team, and as I mentioned, there is so much unknown, right? They have replaced and changed so much in their personnel when it comes to coordinator. You have Philip Montgomery coming in as OC. You have Sam Seifkis coming in from the NFL as the defensive coordinator. And then you have a litany of guys out of the transfer portal on both sides of the ball. And as Beamer talked about earlier on this week in his press availability, that, you know, they're watching film from Bowling Green and Eastern Carolina and Eastern Michigan and Texas State and Central Missouri State and all these places trying to get a gauge on who they're going up against and what this team's going to be exactly. And there's creates so many unknowns. That's a scary thing. But I asked Colby Crawford the other day of VT Scoop of 24/7 what he's most confident in. What are the certainties that he can think of when it comes to this Virginia Tech team? Cut number 24 here, Kale.
What a great question. Where to find certain and uncertainty? If you want to look for certain, I guess you could start at the quarterback position. I know that's maybe the weird place to go, but Kyron Drones, obviously his third year in the program, his second coordinator, but it's his third offense he's learned. He's become a veteran. I know he's dealing with the injuries, obviously in the spring, so maybe not the most certain thing, but I think that's someone you can look to as a stalwart of consistency and just being in the program and getting the rest of the guys up to speed. I think the wide receiver room is going to be good. It's just how well are they going to get distributed the ball going up against guys like Jalen Kilgore and other guys who are going to make that difficult. I'm not exactly sure, but I would feel more certain about that. And then along with that, I think the defensive line room is probably something that this team's going to be able to hang its hat on and getting pressure up front. You talk about guys coming back like Kelvin Gilliam, Oklahoma transfer last year who stepped up, and this year captain of the team, has really made big strides. And then someone I don't think people are talking about enough, Kamari Copeland. Last year, tore his tricep early in the season, but was the MVP of the spring. I think he's going to have a really big year along that defensive line. And they're super deep there at that position. Bringing in the new defensive coordinator, it was a big thing for them in the transfer portal to go out and really backfill there at defensive line. And they think they have realistically 10 to 12 guys in that room that can contribute and they can rotate throughout a game and really not have much fall off. So I would say on offense, it's going to start and end with that quarterback position. And if Kyron Jones can be steady Eddie, and then on defense, that defensive line, you should know what you're going to get.
And Kyron Drones is such an interesting prospect here, right? Because he's been a 2-year starter already at Virginia Tech, and 2023 was a pretty good year. 2024 was a step back. Dealt with some injuries and stuff like that, but still trying to round himself around as a better quarterback. And that's why Philip Montgomery was brought in to be his OC, to try and get the most out of him. And they were excited when this hire was made in the offseason that he was going to be able to do that. And Drones is, got some work to do, particularly when it comes to being able to throw down the field. From all indications, he has good arm strength, but for whatever reason, throwing down the field has not been his strong suit. And when you have a quarterback like that is working with a new OC, that comes from somewhere else completely, unlike South Carolina's situation with Mike Shula. You don't know how many steps forward they've made in the offseason and just how much different they're going to be compared to a year ago, which can be a scary thing. You also hear what Colby Crawford said there about the defensive line for Virginia Tech and how deep they are. And I've brought this up many times. Again, this is talking about a guy coming off the edge, Ben Bell, who's perhaps their scariest prospect coming out of the transfer portal. 10 sacks 2 years ago at Texas State, had 3.5 last year, and decided to self-shirt himself because he knew he was going to be a sought-after commodity in the transfer portal. And lo and behold, it ended up at Virginia Tech. But you heard Kamari Copeland, James Yonkman, who transferred from Eastern Michigan, had 3 sacks 2 years ago. They are very deep on their defensive front. And when you couple that with a historically shaky offensive line for South Carolina, you're not wrong to feel concerned about that, right? Now, we anticipate that Josiah Thompson, and if he is starting at the other tackle spot, Case and Henry are going to make significant strides from a year ago, but we don't know that for sure. You potentially have a true freshman in Shed Surratt starting at one of the guard spots. And again, freshmen on the offensive line, they go through the ringer, right? And they have to endure those ups and downs of learning what it's like to play football at this level. So that's something that does give me a little bit of concern. Now, I hope all these concerns are squashed pretty quickly on Sunday and the talent level of South Carolina wins out at the end of the day. But these are legitimate things that can worry you ahead of this game, saying, hey, I don't know, or I don't feel confident enough in these areas, or know enough about a particular guy or a particular group on this other team that they could come out way better than we think. And that's something that you're looking at, halfway through the third quarter, like, oh man, I didn't expect this guy to have the kind of game that he's having. And now South Carolina's finding themselves in a hole and having to claw out of it. Again, I lean towards South Carolina being able to win this game because I think their roster up and down is better than what Virginia Tech's bringing to the table. And you have at least a little more continuity in a lot of areas compared to what the Hokies have. But who knows? Maybe this team has found the magic elixir when it comes to the transfer portal, and they're going to be phenomenal, and Carolina's going to be in for a long day on Sunday. I don't think that's going to happen, but you always have to explore that possibility when talking about a game like this with a team that is so fresh and so new in so many different ways. Oh, man, it's not just South Carolina and Virginia Tech, though. We've got an entire slate of great games coming up in week number 1. We'll dive specifically into these matchups as the show goes along, but coming up next, our guy Brian Edwards, a Vegas insider, going to look at some of the numbers, some of the spreads, some of the props, and everything in between as we get you set for a full weekend of college football action. That is coming up next as the halftime show. Again, Tyler Head broadcasting live from the Media Center here at Darlington Raceway as a part of the Schroeder's Towing Roadshow and Football Friday here on the game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you here on your Football Friday on the Game. Now that we've gotten back into the football season, we're going to be joined by our guy, Brian Edwards of Vegas Insider, each and every week previewing the weekend's matchups. Brian, first of all, appreciate you taking your time. I know you and Bill are obviously go way back, so I look forward to working with you in the meantime, and we certainly hope to get Bill back in here in a couple weeks. But how we doing, man?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me. Been a good start this season. Had Iowa State last week, and then got spread covers with Buffalo and Miami of Ohio last night. They were little scary at the end, but Buffalo got a stop in the red zone, and Minnesota ran out the clock, fortunately.
Look at the fighting Pete Limbos, man. Proud of that team as always. A lot of things to get to, so we'll try and hit as many of these things as we can over the next 10 minutes or so. Of course, we're locked in on South Carolina, Virginia Tech coming up on Sunday, and obviously the line on this game hasn't moved a ton, still sitting right around a touchdown right now for South Carolina, as both teams, as I've talked about a lot in this hour already, a lot of relative unknowns, and trying to figure out what these teams are going to be in a game like this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, so when the Gamecocks got the good news on Monday on the Utah State transfer running back, Rasul Faison, who is an absolute stud, that was all I needed to pull the trigger. I bought the half point from 7.5 to 7 and went with the Gamecocks. You know, I don't think South Carolina is going to be nearly as salty on defense. I mean, you lose 5 guys in the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft, but I love Sellers. I love Faison. I think Nick Harbor's ready to reach his potential with a big breakout year, and I'm really down on Virginia Tech. They're only 16-21 under Brent Pry, 1-12 and 13 one-possession games. Now I do like their quarterback Tyron Drones, but he wasn't as consistent last year. He had a really good 2023 campaign, not as consistent last year. And I see South Carolina winning by 2 touchdowns. And so I'm on the Gamecocks. Now, if your number is 8 and they're making you pay like minus 140 to buy it to 7, I wouldn't do it. But if you can do it at minus 125, or I'd probably even go to minus 130, I would buy it to the key number of 7. I also played a player prop for Lenore Sellers to go over 60 rushing yards. The odds were minus 106 at FanDuel. So a lot of times, player props won't become available until the day of the game, so might have to look for that on Sunday. But the Gamecocks is my bigger play and bigger investment on this game.
I was going to say that rushing prop for Sellers almost kind of seems like as close to a guarantee as you would think, right?
Well, I like it, and the thing is if you get sacks, that counts in college. Whereas NFL quarterbacks, you know, it doesn't count toward their rushing yards. So that's the only fear. But, yeah, I mean, Sellers can go 70 or 80 yards on any given touch. He showed that to us against LSU last year. So, yeah, I like that prop as well.
A game that's going on tomorrow afternoon down in Tallahassee, Florida State and Alabama, is interesting in a lot of ways. And, you know, you're talking about, we mentioned this earlier, you got a couple key injuries for Alabama on the defensive side of the football there, and then a player prop for Ryan Williams as well.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to have a strong preseason opinion of Alabama because I just haven't seen Ty Simpson against live bullets. I think Alabama's got a top 5 roster, but we all know quarterback's the most important position, and, you know, we'll see. I'll know a lot more at halftime tomorrow about Simpson and about Bama in general. But, yeah, you mentioned the injuries, and they're very key injuries. Defensive end Tim Keenan, who was a preseason first-team All-American in Phil Seals magazine. He had to have tightrope surgery a couple of days ago. Mm-hmm. So not only is he out for this game, but he's going to miss at least the first 3. They hope to get him back by September 27th at Georgia in Week 5, and they have the same hope to get starting running back Jam Miller back. They're just hoping they can have him back by Georgia in late September. And Jaden Roberts, their starting offensive guard, who's a preseason third-team All-American in Phil Seals mag, he's been out a couple of weeks. with a concussion. I haven't looked today, but as of late yesterday afternoon, DeBoer had not faced the media since early Wednesday, and he said he was progressing, but he had yet to be cleared. So I think he's very questionable, probably closer to doubtful. So that's three key players Bama's going to be without. But again, I can't back them as a double-digit favorite until I see Simpson play. And let's remember, they lost outright as a double-digit favorite 3 times last year. But, I've got a lot of questions about FSU as well. So the only play for me on this game, I did Ryan Williams, player prop to go over 80 receiving yards.
Again, talking to our guy Brian Edwards, a Vegas Insider, looking ahead at some numbers ahead of week 1 of college football. One of the, I'd say, trendier and more popular opinions of people is that Toledo has a really good chance to make some noise against Kentucky. I believe you mentioned that number has gotten down to 10 as they are a group of 5 team going up against a team in Kentucky that's not looking too good out of the gate in terms of what they lost from a year ago and what they have coming in this year, and Toledo potentially being able to cover that number.
Yeah, so I got plus 11 way back a couple months ago, early in the summer, and it actually dipped down all the way to 7.5 about 10 or so days ago, but it's gone back up this week. It started heading up on, I believe it was Tuesday. It got to like 8.5, 9, and I think it was yesterday morning it got all the way back up to 10. So yes, I like Toledo plus the 10 as a road underdog. Since 2021, they're 4-1 against the spread with 2 outright wins. One of those outright wins was in Starkville last year. They went to Mississippi State and won 41-17 as a 10.5-point underdog. They were actually up 35-3 with 6 minutes left in the third quarter, and that was before Mississippi State quarterback Blake Shapen had the season-ending injury. So Shapen was playing in that game. In fact, he threw for 319 yards and 2 touchdowns. But Tucker Gleason, Toledo's QB, who is back this year, he was 23 of 28, 285 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and he had a 24-8 TDI-INT ratio last year. Toledo also beat Pitt, another Power 4 opponent, in their bowl game, and Toledo only lost 19 lettermen, which is a super low number in the portal era, and they've got a really good squad, and I think Kentucky needs to be on upset alert. So I would grab the double digits with the underdog here.
So tomorrow, ahead of South Carolina, Virginia Tech playing in Atlanta, you're going to have Tennessee taking on Syracuse. Both teams breaking in new quarterbacks. Joey Aguilar transferring from App State for Tennessee, and Steve Angeli coming over from Notre Dame. And you're leaning towards this one maybe going under the projected total.
Correct. I think Tennessee's going to be really good defensively this year. They've got 8 starters back from a defense that gave up only 16.1 points per game. They've got 5 of their top 6 tacklers returning. But offensively, obviously, going from Nico to Aguilar, the App State and eventual UCLA transfer, I think that's a pretty significant downgrade. They lost Dylan Sampson, their stud running back, with 22 touchdowns and 1,491 rushing yards last year. And Syracuse lost Kyle McCord. So I think Syracuse offense is going to be much less dynamic this year. McCord was fantastic last season, 4,779 passing yards and 34 touchdowns. And Syracuse lost their top 3 pass catchers and LaQuint Allen, their 1,000-yard rusher. So I like under. I got 52. It's now 51 at most spots. If by chance the number is 51.5, I would buy the half point, the key number of 52, because it's 3 off of 49, a multiple of 7. But if your number's 51, I still like it. Let's go under.
Again, talking to Brian Edwards for a couple more minutes here from Vegas Insider. Some action tonight as well. Looking at the UNLV Sam Houston matchup. Both these teams in action last week. Sam Houston falling to Western Kentucky, but UNLV barely escaping after giving up a ton of yards to an Idaho State team coming up from FCS. And you're projecting this one could be a little bit of a shootout tonight.
Yeah, I like over 61. So Sam Houston lost 41-24 at Western Kentucky for 65 combined points last week. And as you noted there, UNLV gave up 555 yards of offense and 30 first downs to an FCS opponent that went 5-7 last year. And UNLV had 535 yards of total offense. We know Dan Mullen is an excellent offensive play caller. They're going to score points, and his defense, last week, looked like the Todd Grantham defenses he had at Florida his last couple of years. So I'm thinking overs are probably going to be a thing for UNLV this year, and I'm going to go over 61 tonight.
Let's hit one more thing looking past this weekend a little bit in terms of Heisman contenders. And obviously we have somebody like Sellers that we expect to be a front runner for the award coming up this year, but some interesting sleepers that you have on your list, including a guy in Haynes King that impressed a lot of people with his grit in that game against Georgia last year.
Yes, I like Haynes King. I got him at 90 to 1 a few weeks back. I still think he's in the 75 to 80 to 1 range. I'm talking like a super small bet, your smallest, your minimum bet. But he's an outstanding quarterback, and he's got he's got a showcase opportunity tonight at Colorado, and then in week 3 he gets Clemson at home. And if he's got good numbers and they can beat Clemson, which I don't think is asking too much. I mean, they are at home to Clemson. Perhaps this ticket will have life in November because he's got a showcase game in Atlanta against Georgia, who will probably be, or definitely I think will be a top 10 team, possibly a top 5 team. And if he were to have a huge game against them and they can pull an upset there, I think he could be in the mix. And he torched Georgia last year in a game they had no business losing.
Well, it's going to be a fun week ahead and a fun season ahead as well. And Brian, I look forward to talking to you and talking some numbers each and every week.
Appreciate it, man. Y'all enjoy the game this weekend.
Absolutely. You too. He is Brian Edwards, a Vegas Insider. You can follow him on Twitter at VegasBEdwards. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the hour. Got to hit the biggest news in the NFL yesterday that shocked a lot of people, including myself, as a wrap-up hour number 1 of the Extra Point. It's not the Extra Point. It's the halftime show. We're live here at Darlington Raceway, part of the Schroeder's Towing Road Show here, getting you set for Cookout Southern 500 weekend and the NASCAR playoffs on your Friday on the game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you here on your Friday, broadcasting live from the Darlington Raceway, getting you set for Cookout Southern 500 weekend. Again, Alex Hayden of the Motor Racing Network said to join me coming up at 1:30. We'll really dive into the specifics of what's going to be happening this weekend out on the racetrack and looking ahead to the NASCAR playoffs as the track that's too tough to tame, the old Lady in Black, is going to see NASCAR for 500 miles coming up on Sunday. It'll pretty much coincide right about the time that Carolina and Virginia Tech are ending, right around 6:30. That you can flip over and watch the start of the race. So that'd be pretty cool. Looking forward to that coming up on Sunday. I didn't expect to be talking about the NFL today, but when the news came down yesterday afternoon about Micah Parsons, you can't not talk about it. So I'm watching a college football countdown yesterday, waiting for the Boise State South Florida game to start, and I got my laptop in my lap and just doing some work and listening to whatever they're saying in the studio, previewing matchups ahead of week one and all that kind of stuff. And I see the little red bar at the bottom of the ESPN crawl flash, breaking news. Oh, okay, what could this be? Micah Parsons traded to the Packers from the Cowboys, and I said out loud, oh bleep, they actually did it. Because I thought for sure, watching this saga over the past, I guess it feels like months now, play out between the Cowboys and Micah Parsons, I fully expected, much like they've done with the CeeDee Lamb deal and the Dak Prescott deal as well, I believe, is get this done at the 11th hour. So they play the Eagles to start the season coming up this now coming Thursday, would have been a week from yesterday. And I figured, game morning or something like that, they're going to get this deal done. It'll steal the headlines from the Eagles, who are going to be, unveiling their championship banner and all that kind of stuff, because Jerry Jones loves a good headline. I didn't see this trade actually happening. I know the rumors and people speculating about it, but, I couldn't believe it until it really happened. But indeed it has. So the Cowboys will receive Kenny Clark, who's a multi-time Pro Bowler, as well as 2 first-round picks, one in 26 and one in 27 from the Green Bay Packers. But the Packers now, as if they didn't already have a lot of talent and a really good team, now get legitimately the best pass rusher in the NFL, and he's getting paid accordingly as he agrees to a 4-year, $188 million contract, which includes $120 million at signing, guaranteed at signing, and 136 in total guarantees. As it's the largest, again, we hear this all the time, largest contract for a non-quarterback in NFL history until the next guy comes along to get his deal. But I think about this, and I'm not a Cowboys fan. And in my time in sports radio, I've, like many people, taken the opportunity to criticize the Cowboys for their handling for a lot of things. And I will be right at the front of criticizing them for how they handle this as well. And it's not just not being able to get a deal done, because there were offers made. But Micah Parsons had a legitimate argument to wanting to be the highest paid pass rusher in the NFL. And the Cowboys weren't willing to budge and meet him where they needed to be. And really, for me, it's this shaming process in the media with Jerry Jones and taking shots at him at press conferences, stuff like that. Even yesterday, maybe it wasn't intentional, maybe it was, I don't know. But in the press conference they had, because of course they had a press conference, after making the trade, he called him Michael, right? And I know he was answering a question. He's like, did I talk to Michael? No, Micah, right? So it's just these kind of things. And again, I'm not a Cowboys fan, but I know plenty of Cowboys fans. And I've seen their vitriol. I got Corey Parson earlier on talking to him. I've seen their vitriol with Jerry Jones grow more and more and more. And again, the knock on them is, hey, you hadn't been to a Super Bowl or an NFC Championship game in 30 years. Well, you're not getting yourself any closer by doing this, right? And when you hear Jerry Jones say something like, hey, those 2 draft picks, those could be future superstars. Well, you had a superstar. You had a superstar already on your team. And if you could have come to an agreement with him, you could have reaped those benefits right now, instead of guys that are going to be drafted in the next 2 years that you don't know, which, by the way, the Packers are going to be good. So those picks are going to be later on in the first round anyway, making picks of guys that you have no idea what they're going to do, what they're going to accomplish, because they're unknowns at this point in time. You don't even know what the spot in the draft is going to be, let alone the player that's going to be available when you get there. So there's another situation where the Cowboys are their own worst enemy. Jerry Jones is his own worst enemy in terms of how he runs this team, the decisions he makes, and I really think this is going to come back to bite him. No, I don't doubt that at all. And again, they've done it to themselves. Now, I guess, okay, they've got the headline for the day or whatever, but I don't know how valuable that is. I already didn't have a lot of confidence in them with Brian Schottenheimer taking over as their head coach, but now you add this in the equation, I think it's going to be a long year out in Dallas for the Cowboys. So there's your headline from yesterday in terms of the NFL. We'll get back in to the college football weekend coming up next. We got a lot of really good week one matchups that we'll dive into as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head flying solo from Darlington Raceway, getting you set for Cookout Southern 500 weekend as part of the Schroeder's Towing Roadshow here on the game. Hey, what's my Columbia? I love telling you about Pro Swing. I've been over there. We've done shows from over there. And let me tell you, it is something you have to go and see in person. Those golf zone simulators are truly works of art. And you can quite literally play on any course all over the world, just about. You can rent by the hour, and they have memberships online. They have memberships available as well. But if you're looking to improve your golf game, get over there for a free 30-minute swing evaluation. They will give you a blueprint of your swing, as well as a couple of pointers and drills to work on to make that swing as good as possible when you get yourself back out there on the range. They also use the OnForm coaching app during swing evaluations that give you a before and after video of your swing, as well as some drills that you can work on particular aspects of your swing. Book online now at ProSwingColumbia.com or give them a call for more information at 803-592-3916. Pro Swing Columbia. All right, hour number 2. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you here, once again broadcasting live from the Darlington Raceway. It's part of the Schroeder's Towing Roadshow, as we're out here ahead of Cookout Southern 500 weekend. We're starting the NASCAR playoffs again. I'm going to talk with Alex Hayden of the Motor Racing Network coming up here at the bottom of the hour, and we'll dive into all things NASCAR playoffs at that point in time, as well as get you set for Sunday's Cookout Southern 500, which of course really looking forward to, and obviously have my responsibilities with Gamecock football, so not unfortunately going to be able to be out at the race this year, but we'll be watching from home and looking forward to what is hopefully going to be a very good show come Sunday night over here at the Darlington Raceway. But we're going to be in for a lot of good shows this weekend when it comes to week 1 of college football. I was trying to think back, and again, I've been watching college football my entire life, so I have a pretty good memory of probably the last 20 plus years, right? I watched it in my, very younger years, my dad and stuff like that. So I don't remember everything from, say, the turn of the century and things like that. But you get in the mid 2000s, then I can pick up and can remember just about all of it from there. I can't remember a week 1 being this loaded, right? Maybe there's a year that I'm not thinking of, and if I am, let me know. Firehouse Ups text line 803-404-6100. But I am just so thrilled with the games that we're getting, the matchups that we're getting, the top 10 showdowns that we are getting over the course of this weekend, which starts tomorrow, started last night. It runs through Monday, where we get TCU and UNC, and that game is interesting for many other reasons, not necessarily with those two teams being ranked, of course, with the Bill Belichick situation, all that kind of stuff, and where the heck Jordan Hudson's going to be during that game on the sidelines in a box or something along those lines. So that's going to be interesting to see. But the highlight game, well, I don't know. Maybe it's not right to just naturally assume that. The debate in terms of highlight games this weekend, it goes between Ohio State and Texas and LSU and Clemson, right? Now, Ohio State and Texas kicking things off tomorrow afternoon. Big noon Saturday there on Fox, 12-10 kick or whatever. As this is the closest I believe we've ever gotten to a 1 versus 2 matchup in a week 1. And I really thought Ohio State would end up being the number 2 team in the AP poll just so they can make this a 1 versus 2 matchup. But give the voters credit. They gave Penn State the number 2 spot. So we got 1 versus 3 instead. And I think it's going to be a great game. Of course, so much of the attention revolves around Arch Manning and his emergence as a starter. Again, he played against UL Monroe and Mississippi State last year and did good against those teams. But this is big boy football now against the defending national champions, who, of course, lost talent on both sides of the football. You have to take that into account. But here's the thing: Ohio State, even when they lose talent to the NFL, is still usually a really, really good team. And I expect nothing less out of them this upcoming season. So we'll get to see just how good Arch Manning is. And here's the thing. He doesn't have to go out there. And I've said the same thing for his chase of the Heisman Trophy. Arch Manning doesn't have to go out there and light the world on fire and throw for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. He can have a moderately successful day. If he goes out there and, completes 65 to 70% of his passes for 240 and 2 touchdowns and no picks, that could probably be enough to help Texas win this game. And the funny thing is, he's the more experienced quarterback of the 2 in this matchup, because you got Julian Say on the other side, who's never taken a college snap before. And it was a tight battle for him in camp with Kleinholtz, the other guy, and then Tavian St. Clair, the 5-star that's coming in that they're very, very excited about. But Julian Sayin won the job, and he's going to have, obviously, an embarrassment of riches around him in his own right in terms of the talent that he has, and namely being Jeremiah Smith. But that's my interesting thing about this game, is one thing that Texas did extremely well last year when these two teams faced off in the semifinals of the college ball playoff is they took Jeremiah Smith away. They doubled him, bracketed him, all that kind of stuff to make sure that he was not effective in that game, which, hey, that good on them, right? You take your risk of letting, at that point in time, Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate be the ones to take advantage of you and hurt you through the air, as opposed to what might legitimately be the best wide receiver college football's ever seen. So they did a good job. It limited him to 1 catch for 3 yards in that game. And I imagine that's going to be the game plan once again today. Now, again, you don't have a Mika Ibuka anymore. You do have Carnell Tate. So he can still go out there and replicate, if not improve, on the 87 yards he had against Texas last time out. But if I'm Texas, I'm taking my chances, right? Like, you know what? Anybody else can go out there and beat us, but I'm not letting Jeremiah Smith do it. I'm allocating whatever resources I have to covering number 4 and making sure he's not blowing the top off of our defense and going for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns, putting up Randy Moss numbers or something like that. Excited because, like, to me, he's the most fun player to watch in college football. And there are plenty of fun quarterbacks, and Sellers is certainly one of them. But when you have a receiver, I felt the same way about Devontae Smith when he was at Alabama. When you have a receiver that's that dominant and doing things that are just head and shoulders better than everybody else at that position, then that's fun to watch. And I hope he's a featured part of this game tomorrow and Texas doesn't completely take him away. But I do think that's going to be the strategy once again for the Longhorns in terms of them trying to win this game. The other big game, of course, is LSU and Clemson tomorrow night in, whether you consider it Death Valley or not, what they call Death Valley in the upstate there, as the Tigers take on the Tigers there. And this game is so interesting from the standpoint of both these teams are looked at as potential playoff caliber teams. And I really will go back to the point I've made many times. I think Clemson looks the most national championship ready than they have in several years, going back to those Trevor Lawrence type of teams, right? Because they return so much talent, because they've got a lot of experience, because they got Clay Klubnik coming back for another year after having a very, very strong second full season as a starter a year ago. And just that returning production to me is going to mean a lot, where LSU lost a lot of guys last year, namely on the offensive line. And that's probably the most interesting battle in this game, is how does LSU's offensive line hold up against that nasty front seven of Clemson's defense? Because last year you had a offensive line from LSU, anchored by Will Campbell, that was legitimately one of the best in the nation. We saw it up close and personal here when they came to town against South Carolina. But you're taking a new offensive line for the most part, going up against TJ Parker, Peter Woods, Sammy Brown, that front seven that Clemson's bringing to the table, that's going to push them to the absolute limit. And with that, I wonder how well LSU can run the ball. Because when you think of LSU offenses, you think about teams that are effective on the ground. That was the case last year. They could not get run games generated for Caden Durham with that offensive line. And I do wonder if that can improve this year with a completely new cast of characters up front. And how well can they protect Garrett Nussmeier? Again, we think Nussmeier is one of the better quarterbacks in all of college football, but as we've learned the hard way here at Carolina, it doesn't matter how good of a quarterback you are. If you're constantly under pressure during the game, it's going to be a long day, and you can only be so successful because you just don't have the time. Sit back there, go through your reads, step up in the pocket, all those kind of things, and get the ball to your playmakers. And we'll see how that fares for Garrett Nussmeier coming up tomorrow. And then there's the added interesting element of this that happened yesterday. AJ Halsey, who's projected to be the starting safety for LSU, is going to be suspended for the first half of this game. He played at Houston a year ago. And in Houston's last game against BYU, there was a fight in the fourth quarter. Now, just like with targeting, when you have these fights and players are ejected, it's supposed to encompass an entire game. And I think this is one of the most broken rules in all of college football, because we, as Sandstorm's playing now, because we have situations like where a guy is ejected on, the last play of the first half, right? Well, then he only has to sit out the second half of that game, and that satisfies the requirement because he's had to sit out, part of both halves. Whereas you can have guys that get ejected on the first play of the game that actually have to sit out the entire game, and it's looked at the same way. But this is a situation with AJ Halsey in this ejection and situation at Houston last year against BYU, where it happened late in the game. But because the rule is one whole game, he now has to sit out the second half the second half of his ejection, the first half of the game tomorrow night against LSU, to satisfy this. Now, it's really weird that this is coming up now, a day before the game, 2 days before the game in yesterday's case, and a lot of people are pointing fingers at Clemson as being the reason why this happened. Now, I'm not going to confirm or deny anything like that, but it is suspicious, fishy to say the least, that it's now coming up this way. And AJ Halsey, again, a projected starter at safety, is going to have to sit out at the first half of this game for LSU coming up tomorrow. And again, when you look at Clemson's offense, they might legitimately have the best wide receiver trio in the entire country with Williams, Wesco, and Moore. And when you look at LSU's defense, which again was shaky again last year at times, maybe better than it was the year before, but you take any piece of that defense, especially the piece in the secondary that's going to have to combat all those really great wide receivers, this could be a situation that puts LSU in a hole early, one that they might not be able to claw their way out of, depending on how that first half of the game ends up going. But an interesting little kind of wrinkle thrown into this right before this game is set to happen, coming up tomorrow up the road, at Clemson. And we'll see. Again, Brian Kelly and LSU, they're on a very bad streak of losing season openers. It's been documented a lot in the offseason. They have not won one since the 2019 season when they ran the table and won the national championship. Since then, the last bit of the tenure of Coach O and then carrying over to Brian Kelly, they are not able to get over that hump of week one, no matter who they play. And last year, Southern Cal, a team that I think at the end of the day, LSU was a lot better than, they could not get over that hump of them in week number one. And we got the famous Brian Kelly, banging his hand on the table situation there that we all made memes and laughed about and stuff like that. But I imagine he'll be that much more fired up if they end up losing this game against Clemson this weekend. And it's a weird dynamic, right? Because as South Carolina people, you're obviously rooting against Clemson, but it's not like you're rooting for LSU either, right? Because the controversy that happened in last year's game with the penalty and all that kind of stuff that negated the pick six and the fallout of that, you don't exactly want to root for the other Tigers. So I guess it's kind of like you watch the game and you're going to be satisfied that one of those teams has to lose, and hopefully you can get some valuable insight into what both those teams are going to be like for those matchups this year, because you're going to Baton Rouge coming up in a little over a month's time. And then you're obviously hosting Clemson here at the end of the year. So trying to figure those teams out going to be vitally important for for Carolina this year. And again, we'll see what's going to happen tomorrow night. I think it's going to be a fun game. Should be a tight game. And we'll see if that AJ Halsey suspension ends up playing a really big role in that game tomorrow night, which you can watch on ABC. High school football going on as we get set for college football this upcoming weekend. Our guy Chris Deering going to join me on the other side, talk about everything going on across not only the Midlands, but the entire state of South Carolina in terms of high school football as we get set for another week on the high school gridiron. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you, part of the Schroeder's Towing Road Show, live from the Darlington Raceway, getting you set for the Cookout Southern 500 and NASCAR's playoffs here on your Football Friday on the Game. And tell you about our new partners over at Tilly's Warehouse, the first wine and spirit store in 5 Points in over 20 years. I went over there the other day, met all the crew, and saw their great selection. It's located right behind the Salty Nut right there in Green Street down in 5 Points. You can't miss it. It's in the old Pavlov's building, and they've got just about everything you can imagine and so much more, including the new Garnet and Black vodka. which 25% of those sales go to the Garnet Trust, which helps benefit student athletes through NIL. They also have a Class B liquor license, which can allow them to sell to the bars locally down there in 5 Points if any of y'all are in a pinch, and so much more. You can stay connected with them on Instagram and Facebook, or visit the website at tillyswarehouse.com for more information and discover why Tilly's is the new must-visit spot over in 5 Points. And welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you here on your Friday on the game, Football Friday. I'm currently live at Darlington Raceway getting you set for Cookout Southern 500 as part of the Schroeder's Towing Road Show. But a lot of football action, not only in the college ranks happening this weekend, but also in high school as well. And we welcome back in on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines our guy Chris Deering. Chris, I do want to apologize first off. I did accidentally call you when I was trying to send our producer your number. So hopefully that didn't go through. But other than that, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I didn't see a missed call, so I think we're all good on that aspect.
Okay, I canceled it as quick as I could. I was hoping it wouldn't go through, but either way, excited to chat some high school football with you. Coming off of week 0 last week, and a lot of interesting games I want to touch on here over the next couple of minutes. And we'll start off here locally talking about Brooklyn Casey and River Bluff. And Brooklyn Casey, a team that did not play last week. So a lot of these teams were in action in week number 0, but Brooklyn Casey, not the case there. Advantage, disadvantage, how does you think that plays out for BC?
Well, I think that's a disadvantage for BC when you don't have a game under your belt. I think if you talk to most high school coaches, they will tell you some of their biggest improvements is from game 1 to game 2, and they are playing a pretty good River Bluff team that's already got a game under their belt. They lost last week, so they're looking to get back on the winning track. And a lot of new things over at Brooklyn Casey with Lewis Clyburn being the coach. G.A. Mangus, the former quarterback coach at South Carolina, is helping out. They got Scotty Dean from C.A. Johnson is over there. So a really good coaching staff, but I think a lot of unknowns as far as players go. They had their quarterback from last year transfer out. He's at Irmo now. So I actually talked to somebody about 11:30 today about that game, and they think BC's got a lot of speed, a lot of team speed. They like a lot of their players, but I think the big difference might be in the trenches on this one. I think River Bluff is a little bit more talented than Brooklyn Casey in the trenches right now, and that's something that Lewis Clyburn's got to get straightened out, which I feel he will. He's in his first year as a head coach over from Camden High. So I think that's where he's looking to improve mostly is in the trenches, and he'll get it done. He's been a good coach and been a good assistant for a number of years, and got a really good coaching staff around him.
How about a Spartanburg team that's going to be rolling into the Midlands taking on Dutch Fork coming up tonight?
That's another one where Spartanburg's already played a game. This is Dutch Fork's first game, and this one it might not matter. Just to be perfectly honest, that Dutch Fork team they're loaded. I think the wild card for them is how well Jackson Knotts, Tom Knotts' son, takes over the quarterback position. Ethan Offering, he's got one more year of high school left. He opted to not play football this year. He's a Clemson baseball commitment, so he's focusing all his attention on baseball. And so that sort of put Jackson Knotts as the starter, maybe a year ahead of schedule. But he's looked good in preseason. He's played very well. Even though it's his son, Coach Knotts is just going to not go out and praise somebody if they don't deserve it. And he's spoken very highly of Jackson. So it'll be interesting to see him take the reins tonight. But where Dutch Fork beats everybody and where I think they're going to be really loaded this year is on defense. I know you guys have talked about Julian Walker, the commit to Michigan. He was right in there with the mix with South Carolina till the end. They got a transfer from Georgia, Jaden Worth. He looks the part. I've seen him in a scrimmage. I think he's going to be really good. And they have a linebacker that, if he was probably 2 or 3 inches taller and maybe 10 to 20 pounds heavier, every college in the country would want him. But Riley Salters is getting ready to start his 3rd year at Dutch Fork, and the kid's just an absolute player. He's always in the right position. He always knows what everybody's supposed to be doing. He's one of my favorite players to watch. I talked to the defensive coordinator over there at Dutch Fork, and I just think highly of Riley Salters, and he's going to lead that defense again this year. And he's just got so much talent around him. It's going to be a fun team to watch.
Talking high school football with our guy Chris Deering here on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines on your Football Friday. And I'll take a look at Lugoff Elgin taking on Camden. Both these teams rolling in this game 1-0 after their victories in week number 0.
Yeah, this is one that Camden sort of dominated this series in recent years, and they're right around the corner from each other. These players know each other well. It's a rivalry game. But this is probably the best chance Lugoff Elgin has had in a number of years. I actually saw them last week. Shamil Shadiq, the wide receiver for them, he's committed to Lenore Ryan. He went for, I think it was 6 catches, 187 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's a pretty impressive debut. I don't care who you are. and they got a sophomore quarterback. He was making his first start last week, so he's got the nerves out a little bit. So I think that's gonna be a really entertaining game. Camden is Camden. I think you got to start when you talk about that team. Dontrell Wilson, big defensive lineman up front, and then Tyler Drakeford. He does a little bit of everything for him. He's gonna play offense, defense, and then Coach Brian Rimp's son there is also the quarterback for Camden, Grayson Rimp. So a lot of pieces on that team that are really good, but I do like this Lugol Belgian team. I think this is their best chance in quite a few years to get a win in this series.
The biggest game of the entire state this weekend, two powerhouses. I know which side Lenore Sellers is going to be rooting for. I know which side our own Preston Thorne's going to be rooting for as South Florence takes on Somerville in a battle of top dogs in the state.
Yeah, that was really a good game across, South Florence is 4A, Somerville's 5A, because they're a cross-division game. But, last year, Somerville handed South Florence pretty easily before they made another run to a state championship. But they had some injuries last year during that game, so I'm sure that they're smarting about that one a little bit. I do expect this one to be a little bit more competitive. Somerville just played on Monday. They had some rain down in the Low Country. They beat a really good Stratford team, 35-30. So that's one I'm gonna keep my eye on most of the night down in the Low Country part of the state, because I do think South Florence is gonna play them a little bit better than last year. But I also think the Somerville team, they're as talented as they are. I still think they have some things to figure out, maybe at quarterback and maybe a couple other positions. But they did put 35 points on the board against a really good Stratford team. So maybe they got it figured out more than I think they do.
Spring Valley's taking on Lower Richland tonight, and we'd be remiss if we did not show some love to Spring Valley for ending their 24-game losing streak last week.
Yeah, that was big time. Our buddy Lou Bajak was over at that one. We pretty much texted all night on Friday nights whenever we had our various games, and when he texted me that it was 19-0 Richland Northeast, I thought, well, they're not going to get a win in game one, but man, those kids fought. They came back, tied it up, went into overtime, then kicked a field goal in overtime to win it. I've told everybody, it's mind-boggling. I've been doing this 37 years, and for Spring Valley to go to a 24-game losing streak, I never thought I would see that with the caliber of athletes that's in that school. So that was a big win for them, a big win for a first-year coach, and his name escapes me right this second. But that was a big win, and anytime you can get that monkey off your back and maybe get a winning streak going. I did. Lower Richland played last week against Lugol. I know they did not play as well as they thought they would, so they are trying to right the ship a little bit too. They have a first-year starter at quarterback, so I think they got to figure some things out. So Spring Valley could come out and go 2-0 the early part of the season. That would be a good big confidence boost for this group, trying to get it back in the right direction.
Well, we'll see that happens, and we'll certainly talk about it next week. Chris, appreciate your time as always. Enjoy the games.
Yeah, Tyler, have a good weekend, and have fun over in Darlington, and whatever duties you have with the Gamecocks this weekend.
Absolutely, I certainly will. We'll talk to you next week. Chris Deering there on the AAA Heat and Air phone lines. We'll discuss what's happening at Darlington this weekend with the NASCAR playoffs coming up next with Alex Hayden of the Motor Racing Network as the halftime show rolls along, part of the Schroeder Sterling Roadshow, live from Darlington on your Football Friday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you here on The Game. Excited for the college football weekend ahead, but always excited to talk some NASCAR as well as we get you set for the Cookout Southern 500 at Darlington Raceway that kicks off NASCAR's 2025 playoffs. And joining me to talk about that now from the Motor Racing Network is Alex Hayden. Alex, appreciate you taking your time. How are we doing today, and how excited are you to get things rolling at Darlington this weekend?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me on. I can't wait. You know, the Cookout Southern 500 is one of the crown jewel races for the sport of NASCAR racing, and it's a big sports weekend, obviously, with the big opening of college football, and to have NASCAR basically wrapping up the weekend Sunday night at Darlington, South Carolina. That's a pretty good exclamation point on what should be a great sports weekend.
It absolutely is. We'll be tied up with the South Carolina game Sunday afternoon, but if that wasn't happening, I would definitely be out there at Darlington once again, because it's truly one of the best experiences in person to see racing there. And I've been fortunate enough to get to go the last couple Southern 500s, and man, it's been a thrill a minute every single time. And you add the playoff drama and all that kind of stuff to it, it makes it that much more fun.
Yeah, it is. It truly is a spectacular venue. You know, there's such a mix with Darlington Raceway between a modern facility with some of the amenities they have, but it's also got that old world charm. This is a perfect mix. It's kind of like the Fenway Park or the Wrigley Field of NASCAR racing, because while it's got its original parts of it, it's also got some modern stuff about it. But the racing, it just never disappoints at Darlington Raceway. Such a worn-out racing surface, eats up the Goodyear tires and causes the drivers to slip and slide. They're going to have to run, as you well know, Tyler, running right up against the outside wall for 500 miles. This is the ultimate test of being a laser-focused driver and not towing over the line.
Again, Alex Hayden of the Motor Racing Network joining me here on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. And I think it's so fitting as we get into the final 10 races of the season to determine who the champion is going to be at Phoenix coming up in a couple months, to start at a place like Darlington, which is, you know, a long, grueling race. We don't do 500-mile races week in and week out like we used to anymore. So this is something that you're not used to quite as much. And obviously it's a test of not only the drivers, but the equipment as well. As you know, we see motors blow in those last 100 or so miles. So it's really a who's who of who can be at the front there at the end of the Southern 500 and pick up a win and maybe advance yourself on to that next round of the playoffs.
Yeah, it is. And it's a perfect test, because with all the playoff drivers being as close as they are in points, there's no clear-cut favorite here for the championship. Yes, Ryan Blaney over the last 6 races has scored more. It's really been overly for the better part of the last 10 or 12 races. So, I think Darlington's a perfect opportunity, with the stage points that are available at the end of stage 1 as well as stage 2. Those drivers are going to do everything they can to try to maximize those stages, which means different strategies, means different levels of aggression. So I think this is a great kickoff to the 2025 NASCAR Series playoffs.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I went back and looked at this last night just to double check. You have William Byron and Kyle Larson tied for the lead going into the start of the playoffs here. They're plus 26 above the cut line. That is the fewest amount of points the leader or leaders have to start a playoff since we've been doing this type of format with the stage points or playoff points and stuff since 2017. So I think it does speak to just how wide open the season's been. As you mentioned, you know, like Christopher Bell had his 3-race win streak at the beginning of the year. Kyle Larson won a lot early. You've had Blaney come on here strong as of late, but nobody's really established themselves as the overall dominant guy this season, which I think could make these playoffs a lot of fun.
I agree. I totally agree. The racing that's different than other stick and ball type sports is involve everybody. And while those in the playoffs have the opportunity to advance and try to win a championship later this year in Phoenix, we let everybody else who's a non-playoff competitor still go out and compete, right? So Eric Jones is a great example. This is his best racetrack statistically, and he drives for Legacy Motor Club. He's not a playoff driver. But somebody like an Eric Jones can still get up there and win this race. So there's an awful lot that goes into racing at Darlington, and it takes so much discipline as a driver, let alone as a crew member. This is going to be the ultimate as far as team test for these NASCAR Cup Series teams, because about 9 pit stops is what it's going to take. Some under green flag conditions, some under caution flag. These members have to be absolutely on their game as well. Crew chiefs have to be on top of their strategy, and obviously drivers need to be laser focused. So it's going to be a true test of team as well as machine this weekend.
Motor Racing Network's Alex Hayden joined me in the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. We previewed the Southern 500 coming up at Darlington Raceway this weekend, and perhaps one of the most intriguing playoff drivers we've ever had in the NASCAR Cup Series this year is Shane Van Gisbergen. Of course, first 4 years Cup Series competitor, 4 wins, 22 playoff points, and all that coming on road courses, which of course is bread and butter coming over from Australia. But I look at somebody like him in this first round, and he doesn't have to go out there and win. As long as he can run okay, you know, top 15, maybe grab some stage points here or there, doesn't finish 30th or worse in any of these races, realistically can get himself to that second round where, of course, the Roval is waiting. And if he wins that, boom, you got SVG in the round of 8. Like, he could be a real spoiler this year in a way that maybe we haven't seen in a while.
I agree 100%. And I think he's just got to survive this particular opening round. And to put it into golf vernacular, I'm a golf guy. Let's put it into golf vernacular. Shane Van Gisbergen, he just needs to hit the ball down the middle of the fairway. He doesn't need to hit it 320 off the first tee. Just put the ball in short grass. And then you go to your next shot. Basically, talking about this, the second race of the playoffs. Then just hit it on the green. You don't need to go flag hunting. So for Shane Van Gisbergen, he just needs to have solid races. Don't get too far over the tips of your skis. Just go out and do what you can do. Finish 12th. Finish 10th if you can. Anything over that, I think, is cherry on top. But I think Shane Van Gisbergen, with what he's been able to do in the regular season, build his points, like you pointed out, to be able to just have a solid opening round, I think he would be just salivating and licking his chops knowing that the Roval waits on number 2. So I'm with you. I think if he can get through round 1, he's got to be the favorite to win at Charlotte on the Roval, and we could have Shane Van Gisbergen in the round of 8.
Well, and, you know, you got Talladega in the round of 8, so you can never know what's going to happen there. And my goodness, we could see Shane Van Gisbergen in the Final 4 for all we know.
It happened. And keep in mind, at Daytona last week, Shane Van Gisbergen led, 9 or 10 laps? That's the most consecutive laps he's ever led on an oval. So he's starting to pick it up. It's a task and a challenge. A lot of people kind of take for granted oval racing in NASCAR, saying, you're just going around in circles. So, well, there's an art to it. It is quite difficult to do. And obviously, Shane Van Gisbergen, a world-class talent, racing both turn left and right on road or street circuits. He's phenomenal at that. But road racing compared to oval racing is something night and day different. If it was that easy, he'd be able to pick it up and do it with success. So it just goes to show just how good these NASCAR drivers are on ovals and how challenging track racing really can be.
So as we look back to the Cookout Southern 500 this upcoming weekend, again, winning in the first round, if you're in the playoffs, will advance you automatically into that second round. Denny Hamlin obviously won there earlier on the season, very good at this track. But it was William Byron that dominated that entire race back in the spring. And obviously the late restart there ended up preventing him from getting the victory. But he's led so many laps this year. It's crazy. He's only got 2 victories, but he's got to be looked at as a favorite. Larson, obviously very good here, winning the Southern 500 2 years ago. Chase Briscoe, who surprised a lot of people by winning it last year, also a viable candidate. And again, it's a driver's track. So it's not always about having the best equipment. It's about lasting those 500 miles and putting yourself in position at the very end to make a move and again, try and get yourself in that next round.
Absolutely. You got to highlight Ross Chastain as well. Statistically, this is arguably his best racetrack as well. Chastain needs something positive to happen. He's just kind of been sliding his way into the playoffs. But a big race at Darlington this weekend for Chastain could really catapult his opportunity to win a championship. I think there's going to be something to say about this. And the playoff driver Austin Dillon, who won at Richmond Raceway a couple of weeks ago, he's got pretty good numbers here over his Cup Series career at Darlington as well. So the Cookout Southern 500, basically what both you and I are saying, Tyler, is this is wide open. I think it's going to come down to which team executes the best and which driver can really pull off the bold move when it matters the most.
Well, I'm excited for it. Can't wait to watch on Sunday night and see what the rest of the playoffs have in store for us. Alex, we appreciate you taking your time, and good luck this weekend on the call.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much for having me on the show, Tyler.
He is Alex Hayden of the Motor Racing Network. This is the Halftime Show. We'll continue on. Get back into college football coming up next as your Friday rolls along You're on the game. starting your football Friday here on the game. We'll get back into some week one action here in just a second, but I've been told we have more tickets to give away for Darlington this upcoming weekend for the Sober or Slammer 200 tomorrow afternoon for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Once again, this will be via our text line. So, and I have 3 pairs to give away, actually. So it's not just the first answer correct. The first 3 correct answers on the Firehouse Ups text line at 803-404-6100 win yourself some tickets to go to Darlington this upcoming weekend. The question to answer is Sunday's Southern 500, 500 miles around this Darlington Raceway, is how many total laps? Tell me how many total laps the Southern 500 will be on Sunday. And if you're one of the first 3 to guess correctly, you'll win some tickets to go see the NASCAR Truck Series tomorrow in the Sober or Slammer 200. So again, 803-404-6100 to submit those guesses now. Kale, play me what happened last night between Boise State and USF. Yep. 33.
Fake! He's got him! What a call! Singleton!
All good.
Touchdown!
I love a good fake punt. Maybe it's been my time here at South Carolina and being ingrained in this version of Beamer ball, but I appreciate good, tricky special teams plays. And Boise State was not able to sniff out Lachlan Hewlett throwing the touchdown there. Now, Lachlan Hewitt is not the punter. He is the backup quarterback. They did not see the backup quarterback trot onto the field, and obviously ended up paying for that. That gave South Florida the 17-7 lead at that point in time, but they proceeded to go on to win the game 34-7, pulling off an upset of number 25 Boise State. First time South Florida had beaten a ranked opponent in, I believe, almost a decade. Alex Skolish doing a phenomenal job out there as he goes into year number 3. Again, this is a program that was 1-11 a couple years ago, and they're off to a fantastic start to begin the season. Boise State couldn't hold on to the ball. They lost 3 fumbles, and they failed to convert 4 different times on 4th down, all in USF territory to cash in at the end of those drives. And now you seriously wonder, like, okay, what does this mean? Because here's the thing. In the power conferences, you've got wiggle room, right? You can lose 2, 3 games. As long as you win your conference championship, you're good. In the group of 5, it's still very much a beauty contest at the end of the day, because only one G5 representative gets to go to the college football playoff. And Boise last year was, without question, the best of the bunch. They made it the playoff and even got a top 4 seed with the way that the seeding shook out last year. But this year, but as a group of 5 team, your margin for error is very thin, right? Boise State lost to Oregon last year in a competitive game. That was their only loss heading into the playoff after winning the Mountain West Championship. Now they better hope that USF's good, but not good enough to like be the G5 representative, because they need quality losses on their schedule to see the committee view them high enough to deem them worthy of making the college football playoff. So again, we kind of almost default to Boise State, right? Because they're always like among the, if not the best team in G5, but getting off the season on a rough start. And we'll see how that shakes out for them the rest of the year. Another note from last night as well, Sam Horn, who is was one of the 2 quarterbacks that was set to play the game last night for Missouri, alternating time with Bo Pribula against Central Arkansas, on his first play of the game, ends up suffering a leg injury, comes back on the sidelines later in the game with the cast on. Looks like a bad situation there. You certainly, wish him the best, but it seems the quarterback competition there has now come to an end, as it looks like there will be a Bo Pribula handling the duties going forward with that unfortunate injury to Sam Horn last night, as Missouri ran over Central Arkansas. And Pribula looked good, but I'm not going to chalk that up to much because, again, it was Central Arkansas. I want to see him against some quality opponents. They'll play Kansas next week. That'll be a little bit better litmus test on how good exactly Bo Pribula is going to be in his time at Missouri as the starting quarterback. We'll get back into South Carolina versus Virginia Tech coming up in the next hour. And again, don't forget Heath Klein, also set to join me for a little while in the next hour as well. We'll get his thoughts on not only South Carolina, Virginia Tech, but also the other games going on around college football this upcoming weekend. It is the halftime show. I am live from Darlington Raceway ahead of the Southern 500, the Cookout Southern 500 this weekend, as well as week 1 of college football. Hour number 3 on the way here on the game. Crowder with First Palmetto Bank. If you're looking for a mortgage guru, Jacob Crowder has you covered. He's helped so many 107.5 Game listeners and can help you too. When we here at the Game, personally recommend him. Owned and operator right here in the Midlands, Jacob has local decision makers, which means quick and precise processing and underwriting. And if you're looking to make a move, give Jacob a call at 803-719-1005 or email him at jcrowder@firstpalmetto.com. Interest rates have stabilized as well as the local housing market, and now is as good a time to buy as any. And Jacob and First Palmetto Bank have the products to help home buyers. If you're considering building a home, they have no-nonsense construction loans that fit your needs. Jacob's MLS number is 198432. First Palmetto Bank is a member of FDIC and an equal housing lender. All righty, one more hour to go. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday here on the Game. We've made it. It's been a long offseason, guys. We have looked at this team 6 ways from Sunday, I feel like. Players we know are going to be good, players we think are going to be good and players that we're really excited about. And I'm finally excited to finally see this in person. Not in person. I'll be here in South Carolina watching it, but finally able to see it with my own eyes on my TV screen coming up on Sunday. And then, of course, very excited to get in and react to it on Monday as well, hopefully for good reason. In my 2 years here so far, we've had some pretty not fun reaction Mondays, to say the least. So hopefully we avoid a lot of those this upcoming year, especially for game number 1, and get things started off on the right foot with South Carolina. As I mentioned, Carolina doesn't have a good track record against FBS teams or against Power 4 teams in the first month of the season. In the Beamer era alone, they've only picked up 2 wins against those kind of teams, that being against Mississippi State 2 years ago and, of course, Kentucky last year. Now, yeah, for the first couple years there, they were playing Georgia in the first month, so that certainly didn't help. But you've got an onslaught of 4 Power 4 teams start the season, beginning with Virginia Tech on Sunday, and obviously we want to get started off on the right foot there. But this is a team of Virginia Tech that is challenging in a lot of ways because you just don't know everything about them because so much of their talent has been picked from other places around the country via the transfer portal, and they have new coordinators coming in, all those kind of things. So we'll see what happens there. But this game also holds a lot of importance to the Beamer family as well, of course, in terms of his Coach Beamer's dad, Frank, and the legendary career had at Virginia Tech, and both of Coach Beamer's Shane's parents will be honored before the game coming up on Sunday. And cut number 29 here, Kale. Here's Beamer last night on Carolina Calls talking about this being a true full circle moment for him playing Virginia Tech.
No, it's pretty wild. Yes. This is happening. I was thinking about it today. It's crazy. My last game as an assistant coach at Virginia Tech was my dad's last game. This was 2015 in the Independence Bowl. That was his last game. He had announced his retirement. That was the last game. We played Tulsa. The head coach at Tulsa that night was Philip Montgomery. He's now the offensive coordinator at Virginia Tech, which is wild that the last time I was at a Virginia Tech football game, the opposing coach is now the offensive coordinator for Virginia Tech. That's crazy, but a lot of special memories, certainly from my time in Blacksburg as a kid growing up when I was Hunter's age, my son now, and playing there, coaching there. A lot of people that are still a part of that program that I consider friends, former teammates, and whatnot. But it's neat. But certainly, my focus is on our team and getting our guys ready to go prepare this week, and then go play really well on Sunday, hopefully. And it's awesome that they're honoring my parents before the game, and it'll be cool to see them there as well. And
so, as Beamer alluded to a couple weeks ago, I think it was when he spoke at Birdies with Beamer, like, hey, I just want to get this thing over with. And again, he was not the head coach here at South Carolina when this game was scheduled all those years ago. It's just kind of a coincidence that it all kind of came together, this perfect storm. And obviously, the Athletic Kickoff game wanting to enter it to honor his parents by honoring them for the game, which is really, really neat. But once the game kicks off, once the clock starts counting down for 15 in the first quarter, then it's showtime. And the names on the uniforms, the logos on the helmets, those don't matter anymore. It's all about doing what you can to make sure that your team obviously wins that game. And again, it's finally an opportunity for us to see exactly what this 2025 South Carolina team is made of after speculating for so much of the off season. And I don't know. I think I always kind of do this no matter what game it is. The closer it gets, the more nervous I do start to feel, because when you're months and months out, or even weeks and weeks out, you just kind of have this like overall confidence. Yeah, I got Sellers, got Dylan Stewart, got a lot of guys, got some guys returning at wide receiver, got a decent amount of guys returning from, the defense a year ago. You feel pretty good about where you're at. But as you get closer, and as we, talk to these people that cover the Virginia Tech program, when we hear from Brent Pry and his media availability, you start to have those little seeds of doubt start to get planted a little bit there, and like, oh, maybe that could go wrong. Maybe this could go wrong, and those kind of things, which is a very natural feeling to have ahead of a game like this, that, if you were playing an FCS team or something like that, you wouldn't quite have those, because 99% of the time, the Power 4 team, it just overmatches the smaller team, and it's not that much of an issue, though upsets do happen. But you got to get off on the right foot. And one thing I've been talking about pretty consistently through this offseason, and really these past couple of weeks, is bucking the trend of week ones under Shane Beamer because they've not been great. Go back to 2021. You played Eastern Illinois, which is like the worst team in FCS. I wasn't here for that game, but Chris mentioned earlier on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, they didn't play the best football that day, but they still won 46-0 because they're South Carolina and that was Eastern Illinois. You fast forward to 2022. You're playing Georgia State and you're trailing in the third quarter of that game. Yeah, you end up winning the game by a couple scores, but it wasn't like this runaway, relaxing night over at Williams-Brice Stadium by any means. And I think, that's something that concerns you from that season. That ended up turning out okay with the upsets at the end of the year. And then 2023, we saw right away the injury issues on the offensive line and how poor the offensive line was going to be that year when they gave up 9 sacks of Spencer Rattler. And that, of course, was a consistent issue throughout the rest of that season. And last year, I don't have to remind you, Old Dominion was just an ugly game. You couldn't get your offense in gear. It took, timely takeaways by your defense to put your offense in position to even score for most of that game. And again, it took a key turnover late in the game by Jalen Kilgore to seal that one, or else, we could have been talking about Old Dominion coming here and upsetting South Carolina. So you just, for whatever reason, don't always come out the gate strongest. And you're not the only one. Again, week 1 is going to be full of, blotchy, ugly football because none of these teams have played games before, minus the teams that played last week on week 0. And even that, there's a lot of sloppiness in those games too, because there's no preseason in college football. So you come right out of the gate and the games count. And that is everybody has to deal with it, obviously. But that is something you always have to keep in mind. And again, for whatever reason, Beamer coach teams are always better at the end of the year. And I look at that schedule and say, that's good because South Carolina plays their toughest games at the end of the year. But again, you can't sleep on those first 5 games either. You got Virginia Tech. You've got Vanderbilt. You've got Kentucky. You've got Missouri on the road. And none of those games are pushovers by any means. I know we don't think very highly of Kentucky, but you never know, especially early on in the season. So you got to get off on the right foot and be able to hit your stride early to make sure you don't have any unnecessary losses ahead of that, murderer's row of games that you have over the course of the final 7 games of the regular season. But getting back into this matchup against Virginia Tech, when you have the quarterback situation figured out, it gives you a lot more assurance, right? Where, let's say, if Sellers had been eligible for the draft last year and opted to go, and we were going into the season talking about Cutter Woods and Aaron Noland battling for the quarterback spot. Let's just pretend Luke Doty's not in that room either. I think the expectations for this team in this game would be a lot lower. But when you have the quarterback situation figured out with legitimately one of the best in all of college football, that goes a long way. Yeah, we don't exactly know what the offensive line is going to be like. We think the running back room is going to be good. We think the wide receiver room is going to take a next step, but we don't know for sure. But what I do know is Lenore Sellers is very special. Lenore Sellers can make plays happen, make that magic happen, as we've seen so many times from his time here at South Carolina, namely last season, that even if things aren't perfect, he can still keep you in a situation and keep you competitive enough to hopefully, win a lot of games, starting with this Sunday, because you do look at, and I go back to what Colby Crawford of VT Scoop 24/7 told us earlier on in the week, they're really excited about their pass rush or about their front sevens, particularly on the defensive line with the depth that they have, the amount of guys they can rotate, in and out of there for Sunday. And when you look at the fact that Carolina is shifting things on the offensive line, where we have, assuming Casey Henry's your right tackle, you have Josiah Thompson and Casey Henry returning for a second season. Now it could be Tree Babalade for all we know, but he's also got some experience. You have experienced guys coming into those spots. Casey Henry is as good as as may as well have been classified as a freshman last year because he dealt with the injuries in years past and never had a full season as a starter. Of course, Josiah Thompson was a true freshman. But in the interior, we're looking at maybe Trovon Ball at one of the guard spots, maybe Shed Surratt, and one guy that we feel pretty confident in, Boaz Stanley, being your starting center coming up on Sunday. But still, it's a new offensive line. It's a group of 5 guys that have never worked together in a game situation together before, assuming that's your starting offensive line. That's always a concern. And when you're going up against a pass rush or a front 7 like Virginia Tech that we think can probably be pretty good, then you hope that it's not something that bites South Carolina right out of the gate, to where Sellers is having to run for his life, is having to make those magic Houdini type plays, which are fine in small doses, but you don't want it to be happening every single time. And just as importantly, you need to be able to run the ball, right? You have finally what you think is a pretty good running back in Rasul Faison, eligible and ready to play. And I'm assuming starting this weekend, maybe Attaway starting, I don't know. But you have that, and you want to see him play up to his highest potential. And part of that is having a good offensive line that's going to be able to block for him. As we've seen in years past, when you don't have a good old line, they can't open up holes. You can only be so successful no matter how good of a running back you are. So I look at that offensive line as an area that I do have concerns about. And then defensively, again, you can't deny what you've lost on defense from last year. Is this the J.R. Johnson show on Sunday? We've heard so many good things about J.R. Johnson through camp, through spring ball, through the summer. Like, this is the guy. Debo Williams, when he sat in with us, just the other week on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, sang his praises and said, man, I like this dude. Here's what I see out of him. I see this element of all of us in terms of the linebacker room that was there last year with him, Demetrius Knight, and Van Martin Scott. A lot of that in J.R. Johnson, which, hey, if that's the case, great. And maybe he takes the reins as that leader of that linebacker room, and we're off to the races once again, flanked by Justin Okoronkwo and Sean Murphy. And we're talking about, wow, can you believe that they nailed the linebacker room 2 years in a row? And then the defensive front as well. Again, we hear and have heard a lot of good things about Gabriel Brownlow-Dinley. We know what his, star rating coming out of high school was. Monkel Goodwine, same kind of situation, has been on campus a year. Nick Barrett, who is a very experienced guy that's been here since Beamer has been here. But is it going to be the same level of production and depth that we had a season ago? It sounds like they got about 5 guys right now that they're pretty comfortable with rotating in on that defensive line. But again, the success of that front a year ago is going to be very hard to replicate. And again, they were able to stuff the run pretty well, which opened up the lanes for the rushers to get in and wreak havoc on quarterbacks, which we certainly hope can be the case again. Again, going back to the other side of the line of scrimmage in terms of, or the side of the defensive line in terms of who that opposite pass rusher is against a patchwork offensive line for Virginia Tech, who's lost pretty much all their starters starting over. They brought in Matt Moore, the offensive line coach from West Virginia. We don't know what they're going to be, but I sure as heck hope that we see somebody tee off coming off the edge. If it's not Dylan Stewart because he's getting double teamed, which is a very likely case coming up on Sunday, maybe it is Ryan Thompson Jr., maybe it is JT Gear or whoever, Desmond Umeozulu, somebody to go out there and continue on that pass rush avalanche that they had a year ago with the 1-2 punch of Dylan Stewart as well as Kyle Kennard. I'll give some closing thoughts on this game at the end of the hour as well as my score prediction. But coming up next, our old friend Heath Klein is going to check in with me. We'll talk about this game. We'll talk about everything else going on around the world of college football as well as we get you set for a full slate of Week 1 action. Tyler Head broadcasting live from the Darlington Raceway ahead of the Cookout Southern 500, the start of the NASCAR playoffs, as well as Week 1 of college football here on the Halftime Show on the Game. All righty, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you here on your Football Friday on the Game, getting you set for a loaded week one of college football, highlighted here locally, of course, by South Carolina, Virginia Tech, playing in Atlanta. And joining us now on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines, who knows the city of Atlanta pretty darn well, our old friend Heath Klein. Heath, appreciate you taking your time today, man. How's it going?
All good, man. How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Excited for the fun weekend ahead. What's the vibe? What's the buzz in the ATL ahead of a couple fun matchups this weekend?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think always that you have a lot of interest in the city for whatever the game is going to be. In this case, 2 games, because you've got the Gamecocks, but before that, obviously, also Tennessee and Syracuse. The other thing, too, that I don't know if everybody knows about, they also have Dragon Con going on down there. So you got people dressed up in all kinds of interesting outfits. So, yeah, it's Labor Day weekend's always live around here.
Yeah, the clash between the comic book nerds and college football fans is always an interesting dynamic over there at the Mercedes-Benz of the World Congress Center. So, yeah, get there early and take in all the sights, I guess.
It will not be boring, I can tell you that much. I mean, look, any day in Atlanta, there's always a chance you see something interesting. But yeah, there's always at least the culture clash. The only other time I can think of that everybody knows about is up in Pittsburgh every year. There's always a furry convention in Pittsburgh, and inevitably they run into the baseball fans that are there. So that's the only other time I remember that there's specifically like a yearly thing like this.
It's 2 opposite ends of the spectrum, that's for sure. When we look at this game for South Carolina, you've spent obviously a long time covering the South Carolina team on these very airwaves, and we've talked about it. It's been a very fun offseason with all the hype and all the expectations going into the year with guys like Sellers and Stewart. How does this team compare to maybe some of the better teams of like the Spurrier years in terms of the feel you get going into a season?
I think it's fascinating, and I'll tell you, the thing that even in the Spurrier years, if you remember, in his best years, the identity of the team was still really more about defense than it was necessarily the whiz-bang offense. The one year that Spurrier had where the offense was clearly the primary identity of the team was 2014, but the defense was so bad that year that even with an amazing offense, they weren't able to have the kind of season that you would have thought a Spurrier offense putting up yards and numbers like that might have had. But even when you think about those best years, there were some offensive highlight moments, but the core of those teams was defense. I cannot remember going into a year for South Carolina where so much of the thoughts and the buildup was, wow, this offense, especially now that Faison's going to actually be able to play, this offense might be really interesting, really exciting. Like even the best years there, that just wasn't the conversation. And I'm fascinated to see it. We just are not used to an identity around that for a Gamecock football team very often.
And talking to Heath Klein here on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. And one thing that's excites a lot of people about this team is the wide receiver group, which I think has been given the tag underrated by a lot of people. And you have 3 of the key components from last year returning in Nick Harbor, Jared Brown, and Mazio Bennett, coupled with a lot of freshmen that are generating a lot of buzz. And I can't help but think that having these guys all together another year, working with Sellers for an entire offseason, with Mike Shula, the new OC, we should see a significant increase in the production out of that room compared to a year ago.
It'd be hard not to. I mean, how much of last year when you needed to play in the passing game, are you looking to Sanders? Are you looking to Simon? And so now having more of a dynamic receiving room gives you an opportunity to see more of what the full potential of this offense could be. I'm obviously curious to see what things are going to be with Mike Shula running the show. I think Mike Shula is a tremendous quarterback coach. I'm not, from his NFL days, especially as a Tampa Bay fan, I'm not in love with Mike Shula, the offensive coordinator on the NFL level, but on the college level, he had some good offenses at Alabama. So I'm curious to see where the differences are. What things does he do better than what Dal Loggins was able to do last year? So yeah, when you have a quarterback who is such a weapon, you can do a lot of things. But at the same time, you know that he is so important. You can't just overload on the idea of, hey, let's make him be Superman. So where do they strike that balance, and how do they strike that balance is going to be fascinating.
Looking at the other side of this matchup, it's no secret Brent Pry is on a bit of a hot seat as they go into another year there. They lost a lot of one-score games a year ago. Drones coming back as the quarterback, work with now Philip Montgomery trying to take some steps forward at that spot. But as we've been talking about ad nauseum the last couple of days, this entire team is almost brand new just about everywhere else. Tons of guys coming in from the portal at just about every single spot. It's kind of a hard team to nail down and figure out. You want to think that Carolina is the better team in this matchup, but how do you view this one?
Well, like you say, you've got two new coordinators and you've got a whole lot of new personnel. So is it possible that somehow that all comes together really fast and Tech is hard to deal with? I mean, look, Philip Montgomery, we know what Philip Montgomery as a coordinator is. It's that old version of the Baylor offense. It doesn't look like they have particularly special talent to run a Baylor style offense, but everybody has a pretty good idea what a Baylor offense is at this point, and certainly there's elements of it in what you see from Tennessee. So even though they haven't played Tennessee last year, they've seen Tennessee. They've gotten a chance to see what at its core the Baylor scheme is. I don't know if he can run that full bore week one anyway, but defensively, I mean, you've got a guy coming in from the NFL that was not their first choice. What I understand wasn't even their second choice for coordinator. Is he going to run a scheme of his own? Is he going to run Brent Pry's scheme and just sort of, you're the one who gets to cook for the celebrity chef's restaurant? Is that how this is going to be? Don't know. But look, South Carolina clearly has the better hand of cards here. We can also look around and see in already a bunch of these games that have been played, teams that have the better hand of cards have come out and been sloppy, not look sharp because it's week one, and that's the kind of thing that happens. So do they have such an overwhelming talent advantage? There's no way they could lose this game? No. But if they're not sloppy while Virginia Tech is really sharp, it's hard to imagine they don't win the game.
And talking to Heath Klein here on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. And of course, you were here when Beamer got hired all the way back in December of 2020. I don't know how far forward you looked ahead, but going into year number 5, is this where you maybe thought the program was going to be ahead of schedule, behind schedule? Like what's your assessment of where you expected him to be at this point?
I didn't really have expectations, to be honest with you, Tyler, because, we didn't know what a Shane Beamer-led football team was. So what we did know was that it was a really tricky time to take over. The combination of the pandemic and the limits on recruiting that came with that. We obviously had no idea what was coming with NIL and the impact that was going to have, but it was a really difficult time to take over. It was just after the transfer portal had begun, but that was also causing some real issues for teams dealing with it. If you had told any fan that Shane Beamer, taking over what he took over from Will Muschamp, would have made a bowl every year but one and would have his team ranked in the top 15 this season, will you take that deal or not? One, the fan would have said, well, did we beat Clemson? And then two, after the fan got the answer that, yes, you not only beat him, you beat him twice, there's not a sane fan on earth who wouldn't have taken that deal.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about some other games going on around week 1 of college football coming up next. Again, Heath Klein joining me on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. Halftime show rolling along on your Football Friday here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head along with you here on your Friday on the game. We are presented by the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. By the way, Heath Klein, our friend, hanging on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines for a little bit longer here. I want to take a look at some other games happening around week one of college football. Of course, things get started off tomorrow, high noon, really 12:10, I guess, is when it's going to kick between Texas and Ohio State. Almost had 1 versus 2, but we'll take 1 versus 3. Obviously, both teams come in with a lot of talent, spend a lot in the transfer portal, but both having questions at the quarterback spot. Are you buying into the Arch Manning hype? Where are you with all this on the Texas side of things?
The thing is, I don't think you have to believe in the Arch Manning hype to still believe Texas might be the better team in this game. And the thing that I don't feel like maybe because of Arch Manning we're paying enough attention to is that you've got not one but 2 new coordinators at Ohio State. And you could say all you want about, well, Hartline's been there and he's familiar with the personnel. That helps, but he hasn't been calling plays in a game. And even when they knew, hey, we got to give him the title to try and keep him, they didn't let him call plays in the game. After Chip Kelly, they knew, okay, this time we got to give him the wheel and let him drive the car, or he's going to leave. Somebody will say, he's such a good recruiter, we'll just give him the wheel and see what happens. So they had to do this. Is he ready for it? Are they excited about him being ready for it? Like, I don't know. And then on the other side, you got a guy, Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia hasn't even been a good NFL defensive coordinator now for a number of years. And you're telling me that he's going to come to college football and right away match up with one of the best play callers, if not the best play caller on this level in Steve Sarkisian, and he's going to be head up neutral in that matchup? I don't think so. I think he's going to be at a deficit. And the history of great NFL minds coming to college and still struggling to figure out what can your players do that you can ask them to do and they can execute versus what you could ask. Like when Monty Kiffin was at Tennessee with Lane Kiffin. Monty had coached a lot more college football back in the day than Matt Patricia has. And yet Monty Kiffin had guys like Derek Brooks be able to cover running backs. It turned out when you ask college kids to do that kind of thing, it didn't work so well. And I am fascinated to see how this Patricia thing works out for Ohio State. We know they've got athletes and great players like Caleb Downs will still make plays. But I hate that matchup for them week one, him against Sark. And to me, that's going to be the story of the game, frankly.
Looking at the offensive side of things for Ohio State, of course, Jeremiah Smith's reputation speaks for himself, but Texas did a really good job of taking him away in that semifinal game at the end of last year. The unfortunate thing is you have Carnell Tate on the other side who had the most receptions and yards in that game, back at the end of last year. And I would assume, considering the fact they're probably going to allocate as many resources as they can on the back end of Jeremiah Smith, again, you probably expect Carnell Tate to shine once again tomorrow.
You'd think. I am interested to see, can Texas, when they have the ball in offense, can they run the ball effectively? Last year in that game, they only ran for about a half yard per carry when they ran the ball. Can they run the ball effectively and be two-dimensional offensively? If so, again, I think you're going to try and, if you can, not ask Arch to go on the road and be slinging the ball around, minimize some possessions, because what you just hit on, Jeremiah Smith might be the best player in college football. He's the kind of guy who can just solve all your problems, take over and win a game. If you're Texas, I think you're looking for fewer possessions, not more possessions in this game. And I think if you can run, that helps minimize the chance of him just wrecking shop like that.
Again, talking to Heath Klein here on the AAA Heating and Air phone line. Speaking of running the ball, it's something that LSU did not do very well a season ago, despite having a very experienced offensive line. They are obviously going into Clemson tomorrow night to take on the other Tigers in that matchup. And you got what you have in Garrett Nussmeier. You have a pretty good core of receivers, but that offensive line, very much a question mark what they're replacing from a year ago. And, can they open up those gaps? Can they protect Garrett Nussmeier against what we think is going to be a very strong front seven for Clemson? Might be the biggest key in that matchup.
Yeah, I'm far from sold on Clemson as one of the top couple of teams in the country. And I've seen people pick them for the national title. You're going to have to show me a lot more than what I've seen from Clemson in the last year to say, well, just because you're more experienced now, suddenly you're the very best team in the country. But I get it. That's the trend. Michigan, Ohio State. I get it that now everybody thinks, well, Penn State and Clemson must be the best because that's the trend the last 2 years. So they've got the most experience. They must be the best. But having said that, I still think Clemson should win this game. LSU has some real questions, as you noted. And beyond that, I just feel like Brian Kelly is trying way too hard here. In his coach's show, he made multiple comments about how Next week we'll come back and talk about this win, and I'll get here early so we could talk about the win, and we're going to go there and get this win. And it just feels like someone who knows the fans are frustrated. They haven't won an opener since Ed Ogeron was the coach. Heck, they haven't won since Joe Burrow was playing for them. And so they're ticked off and they want to win. And so he's trying to show, hey, look at me. I'm doing everything I can to win this opener. But it just feels forced. It feels like he's trying too hard. And I think part of the reason he's trying too hard is because he's looking and saying, yeah, this isn't a great matchup for us. This is a team that's got strong players on the D-line. We don't have our offensive line set. We haven't been effective running the ball like you expect an LSU team to be recently. I like Nussmeier as a player. You tell me LSU wins, I wouldn't say, oh, come on, Tyler, you're hopped up on goofballs. But right now, of the big games this weekend that the SEC's got, a bunch of them are playing on the road. This is the one I like their chances in the least of the high-profile games.
There does seem to be a lot of testiness between, the LSU faithful and obviously Brian Kelly. And look, they've had good seasons, but we expected more out of them the past couple of years, especially considering what they did in the first year by just making the SEC championship and beating Alabama in the process. So let's say they do lose to Clemson this weekend by, 14 points or something like that. They're not going to fire Brian Kelly because he got an insane buyout. But how does that dynamic continue to exist when you're just continuing to underachieve?
It's tricky because, look, they can still make the playoff. You're certainly not going to get knocked out of the playoff just by virtue of one loss against the team that's also supposed to be in the playoff if you believe that they're going to win the ACC at minimum. You're not going to lose out because of that. But what it does do is it allows people to say, okay, great. So you're telling me now we're going to go 10-1 the rest of the way and we're going to play in the SEC title game because at 9-3, you probably find yourself on the wrong side of the line. Maybe not, but right now you got to assume you better be 10-2 or better if you want the committee to put you in. So you've left yourself almost no room for error. You've got to say, okay, we're going to be able to handle Florida. We're going to be able to handle Georgia. We're going to be able to handle, or not Georgia, Alabama. We're going to be able to handle all these teams on our schedule, basically, except for one more spot the rest of the way. Even if you play Clemson close and you lose, we'll say, field goal or something. I just think it's going to be hard for your fans to believe and buy in on that if you don't win the game. I think it makes his life a lot harder. But I will say this, talking to somebody there, look, Louisiana just doesn't have money like some places do. And the amount of the buyout is so enormous that he told me maybe Kelly leaves if he's just miserable. Maybe he leaves. But in terms of them doing the Jimbo and buying him out, he said, it's not happening. Not this year. They said next year it starts to get in the range where it's at least conceivable. But this year it would take an FSU level meltdown from last year to get it to the point where LSU could try to figure out how to move the money around to buy him out. So for everybody, winning this game would make their lives a lot easier.
A couple more minutes here with Heath Klein on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines on the halftime show. You mentioned Alabama. They've got their own test on the road at Florida State, coming up tomorrow afternoon. Of course, Florida State coming off a disastrous season last year, but a lot of questions of what year two is going to look like with, with Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. Obviously, Ryan Grubb coming over, his former OC, back in the fold, and they're starting a guy that we don't know a lot about in Ty Simpson, but you still have a ton of talent. I know they're dealing with some injuries of some key guys being out for this weekend, but what is the second year of expectations at Alabama, in your opinion, for Kalen DeBoer, and what can this team accomplish?
Well, it's got to be playoffs. There's no doubt with the raw ability they've got. Yes, they've suffered some blows and losing some key guys. You're down your starting tailback, you're down a key defensive tackle. Those things matter, but you're Alabama. You're deeper than basically everybody in the sport except for maybe 3 teams. So you're supposed to be able to handle those kinds of losses because behind him is supposed to be another 4 or 5-star stud that just hadn't quite gotten on the field yet, but can wreck shop once he does. So I don't think you're going to get any sympathy from anybody about being down a couple of bodies, even if they're really good ones. Look, the expectation is playoffs. It's playoffs no matter who it was. It would be playoffs if Saban was there. It's playoffs for whoever's after Kalen DeBoer one day. That's the way it is. And I think they can get there. I don't. Last year, you had a situation where you had him learning the SEC. At the same time, he was trying to learn his locker room with a quarterback that was not a fit for what his offense is. And that, frankly, I'm not sure is all that good a pure quarterback. It just was a bad mix. And this year, I think it's going to be a lot better because of Grubb, but also just because he has more of an idea of what he's dealing with. The thing I am fascinated to see in this game, I don't think FSU can win it. But if you look last year on the road in particular, they struggled, and they struggled with mobile quarterbacks, as Lenore Sellers, among others, showed against Alabama last year. Well, Castellanos is not a great quarterback, but he's definitely got great legs. So does that defense show progress in handling a player like him? Even if they don't win the game, if Castellanos is making a bunch of plays, that makes you say for later on with somebody like a South Carolina with Sellers, okay, this still looks like a flaw you can exploit. I think we're going to learn a lot about that defense from this game, even though I'd be stunned if Bama didn't win it.
Heath, man, great stuff as always. We appreciate you taking your time. Have fun out there in Atlanta this weekend. No, it's going to be a busy place between the games and Dragon Con going on, but always a good time and always good to hear from you, man.
Oh, yeah, man. Always glad to do anything for Columbia. And for the record, by the way, the Twitter account's still Heath Radio. I sent out a thing. If anybody's coming over, the station I work at now, 6 Days a Fan, we've got a tailgate going. So if you want to come and have some beers and cheese dip on us, it's there for you to download if you're interested. So Heath Radio on Twitter. Tyler, always fun, man.
Absolutely. Heath Klein there. And again, that sounds fun if you're going to be out there in Atlanta this weekend. Go and check those guys out. Hang out, tailgate, and get set for South Carolina and Virginia Tech. I'll give my final thoughts, keys, and prediction ahead of this game coming up next as a wrap up today's edition of the Halftime Show on your Football Friday. Again, broadcasting live from Darlington Raceway here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. Tyler Head along with you on the halftime show here in your Football Friday. Again, been hanging out here at the closet in the back of the media center at Darlington Raceway ahead of this weekend's Cookout Southern 500. So, again, thank you to Josh Harris and everybody at the track, as well as Schroeder's Towing for allowing us to be out here today. It's been a lot of fun. Get to go out and explore once the show ends here in a couple minutes. But it is time to give some final thoughts on South Carolina, Virginia Tech. Before I do, though, I did see this, which is really cool. Of course, tomorrow is Lee Corso's final college game day. He'll make his final headgear selection at 11:59 tomorrow morning, and we'll all be in tears and all that kind of stuff, saying goodbye to a legend. Brett McMurphy of On3 reporting Fox is going to televise Lee Corso's final headgear on a big new kickoff. Also, Fox's Tom Rinaldi and Chris Felica, former game day crew members, are also going to have some tributes to him throughout the show, which that's really cool. Again, these are two rival shows, but it's neat to see them kind of put those sides down to pay tribute to the legend that is Lee Corso, who we're all going to miss seeing on our TVs each and every weekend. And I'm ready for the emotional 3-hour roller coaster tomorrow of paying tribute to Lee Corso one more time on TV. It's going to be a great time. And that'll lead us into our college football weekend. But Sunday, Carolina and Virginia Tech take each other on in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. I just want to say this. This has been such a fun offseason. Don't take that for granted. Last year was a lot of fun. 9 wins, good bowl game, cusp of the playoff. Didn't quite make it in, but still so much hype this offseason. You're getting ranked. You're appearing on lists. Sellers is on the short list for Heisman Trophy, first-round draft pick, all this kind of stuff. I've thoroughly enjoyed these past 8.5 months getting to talk about this team and creating the excitement for the season. I am pumped for what the season can be. Nervous about some things because there's the unknowns that we don't quite know yet about this team, but I'm so excited to see what this team can be to hopefully live up to what last year's team did, if not surpass what they did. And we'll see if they can do that starting on Sunday. As far as this game goes, my biggest key is not shooting yourself in the foot too many times, right? And again, it's week number 1. There's going to be mistakes. You're going to do things that are a little bit sloppy and a little bit ugly. Even Sellers is probably going to do something you go, oh, man, didn't like the look of that. But it's game 1 jitters, right? Shake them off. Continue on, and just don't let it be a consistent thing through 4 quarters on Sunday to put yourself in a situation where you can't dig out of it. Don't continue to give Virginia Tech a short field where they can punch it in and score, and suddenly you find yourself down 17-3 or something like that. Like, hanging on to the ball is going to be huge. Turnovers, obviously a big problem last year. I hope Sunday is the beginning of turning around on that to make that much better. You're going to have to contain Kyron Jones. Again, last year was a rough year for him, but he has the ability, especially the athleticism, to make plays happen, just like Lenore Sellers does. And we don't know how good he's got in the offseason working with Philip Montgomery, but you have to assume he's taken some steps forward. And I hope this new-look defense with a lot of new faces and a lot of guys stepping into important roles like J.R. Johnson, like, Monkel Goodwin, Gabriel Brownlow Dinley, Brian Thomas Jr. expect to be that other guy on the end of the defense, pass rushing. I need all these guys to step up and make big plays. DQ Smith to kind of maybe fill that hole left behind by Nicky Manwari, who, again, was the eraser on the back end of that defense that cleaned up so many things that maybe didn't go exactly well on the front end of the defense. I need to see those things coming up on Sunday. And this receiving core, I talked about with Heath Klein a few minutes ago. They should take a significant step forward. And I think this game coming up tomorrow against a okay defense from Virginia Tech a year ago that brings in a lot of new guys via the transfer portal in that secondary. I want to see the pass game take advantage of that. And Rasul Faison, let's see him cook. We've been hyping this eligibility for a while. He finally got it. I want to see him go out there and have a phenomenal game. I want to see him rush for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. Don't know if that's going to happen, but I have faith in him and hopefully in this offensive line to go out there and make some good things happen as well. And also be weary. Virginia Tech is a team that feels like it has his back up against the wall. Again, Pry is fighting for his job in a lot of senses right now. They're not going to be afraid to maybe think outside the box, maybe get a little bit risky. Be prepared for everything. Don't get caught like Boise State did last night, not seeing a backup quarterback walk onto the field instead of a punter, and then they burn you for a long touchdown. You know what I mean? Like, have your P's and your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Those kind of things are going to be so vitally important for South Carolina coming up on Sunday. So for me, I think Carolina wins this game 34-21. Again, I expect there's going to be, maybe a blown coverage or 2 or a missed assignment where Virginia Tech's going to score. But I think Carolina's got the better horses overall on this team to go out there and win this game and hopefully start this season off right. And that means we'll have hopefully a fun reaction Monday coming up on Monday. Talk about this literally mere hours after this game ends, 12 hours for, the morning show. And then, 15 or so hours, for our show after that. And hopefully this spark of a good season. So excited for it. It's been a fun off season. Can't wait to see this team in action. And hopefully it's going to be a fun Sunday. If you're going out there to Atlanta, be safe traveling there and traveling back. And at the end of the day, go Gamecocks. Hope for the best. Appreciate everybody here at Darlington Raceway for allowing us to be out here, as well as all my guests from the show today, Heath Klein, Chris Deering, Brian Edwards, as well as Alex Hayden for the Motor Racing Network. It's been a blast, and talk to you guys on Monday. Enjoy the weekend.